There we go. We're recording in progress. Okay, so we're back. It's been a while, so let's try and get back into it. We're on Masechet Makkot Daf Tetvav Amud Aleph, making our way through. So we were talking about, if you remember, it's been a while. The last sugya we were discussing was certain types of lavim which may or may not have Makkot for them. So we said, well, we've spoken, it's going to come up again. We'll discuss today the concept of a lav shenitak le'aseh. Again, when you have a lav which is nitak le'aseh, meaning there is a positive mitzvah which serves as a tikkun, serves as a correction, so to speak, for the lav which one committed, then we say there would not be Makkot for that. And one of the explanations we gave is that in the same way that Makkot comes and serves as a kapara for the lav which was committed, so that here where the Torah specifies that there is an aseh, that there's a positive action which comes to remedy that, so to speak, that comes in place of the lav, that comes in place of the Makkot. So then Rabbi Yochanan said, not just that's regarding a lav she nitak le'aseh, but what if we have a lav she k'damo aseh? What if we have where a lav she nitak le'aseh means that the lav comes first, the aseh is therefore dependent on the lav, meaning this is the kind of mitzvah we don't actually want to fulfill, but we have to. So for example, somebody stole, and then there was the lav of stealing, and the aseh would be of returning the stolen object, right? That is dependent on that aseh is dependent on the lav, because if you had not transgressed the lav, you could not fulfill the aseh. It comes directly after them. However, if you have a lav shekdamo aseh, says Rabbi Yochanan, when you have a lav, the aseh came first, i.e. the aseh is independent of the lav, meaning it may well be that a person performed the lav and then they have to perform the aseh, and that comes as a correction. However, the aseh is not necessarily dependent on the lav. It may have come first and you may have been able to fulfill it without. So in such a case, says Rabbi Yochanan, you would get Makkot. Right? The principle, everybody agrees, lav shenitak le'aseh, there is no Makkot, except for in certain cases, which we'll discuss today. But lav shenitak le'aseh, there is no Makkot. But a lav shekdamo aseh, says Rabbi Yochanan, yes, then there would be Makkot. And then the Gemara discusses, wait a minute, we have a big kasha on Rabbi Yochanan, because, and the Gemara in fact says at first that Rabbi Yochanan Hadarbe, that he changed his mind, he went back because of this kasha, because the case of ones. Right, we discussed there was a case of ones whereby there is then a mitzvat aseh that the Torah gives, that the ones would have to marry this woman, assuming that she agrees, and then he has a lav, he has a law taseh not to divorce her, right? So there is the mitzvah to marry, and there is the law taseh to not to divorce. Here, this is the example we gave of a lav shekdamo aseh, that the aseh comes first, because the aseh of getting married stands already if he does not divorce her. If he then goes and divorces her, well, now the aseh to go back and marry her, to remarry her, kicks in again. As we said, that's only if he's a Yisrael. If he's a Kohen, and Kohen is not allowed to marry the divorcee. So that was what, if you have a look, it's all inside, but we'll just see it. So near the top of the Amud, we're on Daf Tetvav Amud Aleph, about 6 lines from the top, right? That was the bright. That's it, the Tanya. Ones shegilesh. So an ones who then divorced. He's not allowed to divorce, but he did. Im Yisrael machzir ve'no lokeh. If he's a Yisrael, so then he has to remarry, and he does not get Makkot. Im kohen ulokeh ve'no machzir. But if he was a kohen, so he gets Makkot, because he cannot machzir, he cannot remarry her. But the kasha was, therefore, im Yisrael hu machzir ve'no lokeh amai lo taseh shekdamo aseh ve'lilki. But if you say that he's a Yisrael, therefore, when he remarries, why does he not get Makkot? Because this is not a lav shenitak le'aseh. This is a lav shekdamo aseh, because the aseh came first. Because the aseh to marry her, he could have married her, and he should have married her. He did marry her before he got divorced. And now, if he divorces, he has to remarry. But that's not that initial mitzvah of remarrying her was not dependent on the lav. Okay, so that was the kasha, that was the big kasha on Rabbi Yochanan, and the Gemara went through, trying to understand, trying to prove, had a number of different attempts. We won't go through all of them again, But the Gemara had a number of different attempts to prove that, in fact, why is this case different? Then maybe you would say that, in fact, the case of the ones is a lav shenitak le'aseh, based on how we learn out from the pasuk, based on the fact that clearly the pshat of the pasuk is that he has to marry her. That's referring to the case of before there was before they got divorced. But maybe if we learn out, either we learn out from this pasuk of ones, or we learn out from the pasuk of Motzi Shemra, or by a Kal Vachomer. The Gemara went through it a few different ways to suggest that there may be some superfluous words in the pasuk, and therefore when it says that he has to marry her, there is an independent asay which is coming to remarry her after he got divorced, and then you could say that it's actually a lav shenitak asay and not a lav shekdamo asay, and that's why there would not be malkut. So let's pick it up towards the end of the Amud. Right, we saw different attempts to learn this way, and they were ultimately rejected by the Gemara. Right, we tried to learn a Kal Vachomer from Motzi Shemra, and we saw that between the case of Motzi Shemra and the case of ones, you couldn't learn one from the other because one is a lav she'ein bo maaseh, one is a case where you have you get malkot and a knas. So each of them had their own stringency. You couldn't learn from one to the other. So towards the bottom of the Amud, and the second last of the wide lines. So again, our question is why Rabbi Yochanan initially said that lav shekdamo asay you would get malkut, but the case of the motzi the case of the ones, whereby the person married, then the person got divorced, and now he has to go back and remarry. That is a case of a lav shekdamo asay. And based on what Rabbi Yochanan said originally, you would think there would be malkut. But the Gemara says there is no malkut. So we're trying to understand why. We're trying to understand why, at least, you would not call this a lav shekdamo asay. So says now the Gemara on the second of the wide lines, about halfway through the line. Ela amar Rava. Rava comes up with the following answer. Ela amar Rava. He says, Kol yamav be'amod vehachzer. He says all of his days, his entire life, there is a principle here of amod v'achzer, of go back and get married. In other words, what is Rava saying? Says Rashi over here. Ela amar Rava. Says hadatanya bo'ones machzir ve'eno lokeh. Why is it that in this case we're discussing of ones that he needs to go get remarried and there is no malkot? Right, contrary to what Rabbi Yochanan seemed to suggest. Tama, the reason is this: Mishum dal kochach lav shenitak le'aseh. Because really, this is a lav shenitak le'aseh. This is not a lav shekdamo aseh, meaning the aseh to go back and remarry her. That is a direct result that is coming. That is dependent on if he divorced, as he was not allowed to. If he transgressed that lav, then he has this aseh. And how do you see that? How do you know? Dama krakol yamav. Because you learn it from the words of the pasuk that it says kol yamav, right? At the end of the day, it says the Torah tells us, it says lo tiyeh leisha lo yuchal l'shalcha kol yamav. Pasuk says she will be his wife. He won't be able to send her away. He won't be able to divorce her. Kol yamav, for his entire days, his entire life. Those last two words, kol yamav, are superfluous. Why does it say that? Right? Says Rashi, de'amakra kol yamav lo avei lemechtav. It didn't have to say kol yamav. Ela lo yuchal l'shalcha. It could have just said he can't divorce her. That's enough. We understand. Right? My kol yamav. So what does it mean? Kol yamav. Achi kamar. It means to say the following. Lo tahei b'shilucha kol yamav. Ela yachzirena. I.e., if he was to go and divorce her, then she shouldn't stay in her divorced state for his entire life. He has to go back and he has to remarry her. Of course, this is referring to where it's Yisrael, not a Kohen, right? But he says the fact that it says Kol Yamav, that's including the case specifically whereby he divorced her, that he has to now go and remarry her, and that is the Lav Shenitak Le'aseh. This is what it means to say, go back and remarry. So this is how you read the whole pasuk. Lo tiyeh leisha im shalcha. Meaning she should be his wife, they should be married, even if he divorced her. That her divorce, that should not stay for kol yamav. Harei aseh hu avarat alav. So therefore, you see in this case that the aseh that's being referred to specifically by the pasuk does not proceed and is not independent of the lav of divorcing, but it's dependent one on the other, and therefore it is a lav shenitak le'aseh. Based on that, by the way, we could therefore say Rabbi Yochanan does not have to go back. That Rabbi Yochanan's principle, again, what's the application? We're a little bit stuck. But what the principle of lav shekdamo aseh, one would get malkot for, but he simply says that in fact now this case of ones is not that because it's a lav shenitak l'aseh. So that's what the Gemara says. Elama rava kol yamav be'amod v'achzer. V'chen continues. V'chen ki ata Ravin. So too when Ravin came, he said, Amar Rabbi Yochanan. So you see here, Ravin brings this memra in the name of Rabbi Yochanan. So Rabbi Yochanan himself, this is how ultimately he resolved the kasha that was difficult for him. Okay, so Maler of Papa le Rav. Now we have a challenge on that. Says Rav Papa the following: V'ha lo dami lave le lav de chasima. Okay, you're saying now that. Essentially, what you've said is that this case of ones does not challenge Rabbi Yochanan's original statement, because this is not a case of lav shekadamo aseh. It's a case of lav shenitak aseh, which everybody agrees there would be no malkut for. Okay, fine. So what comes out of that, and what comes out of the fact of Rabbi Yochanan saying that, the Rabbi Yochanan's original statement on the previous Amud that a lav shekdamo aseh you would get malkut for, that stands. So lav shekdamo aseh you get malkut. Now we learned on the previous daf that where do we derive the principle of malkut for? We derive it from the mitzvah of chasima, right, of mazling. That we said any case which is similar to the case of chasima, that is the case where you would get malkut. So therefore, for example, lav she'ein bo ma'aseh, where there is no action, is not similar to chasima, and we said chasima is juxtaposed as a hekesh between that specific mitzvah and the section of Malkot. So anything that is dissimilar to the love of Chasima, you would not get Malkot for. So says Rav Papa to Rav, v'halol dami lav de Chasima. A lav shekdamo aseh is not similar to Chasima, but the love of lo tachsom shor b'dishor, you don't find that there is an aseh. So therefore you should say that this is different, and there shouldn't be Malkot. Says Rashi, ha lo dami lave. In the second wide line in Rashi, he says, this which Rabbi Yochanan said. We thought he went back, but now we resolved the kasha, so he doesn't go back. Where we say that there's a lot aseh which is preceded by an aseh, you get malkot. This is not similar to chasima. She'ein bo aseh. There is no aseh then. And again, Rashi is just reminding us. Why do we learn from Chasima? Because v'usamuch le'parashat Malkot. It is juxtaposed to the parasha of Malkot, and therefore it serves as the binyan av. So says the Gemara, so on says back Rava, Amarle mishum dektav be'rachmana aseh yetera migragara. Says Rashi migragara b'tmiyah. He says he's asking in amazement, right? Asking the question. He says, what do you mean? Just because there's an aseh that's written next to it, should that make it worse? I.e., what we learned from Chasima is giving us the principle, what kind of lav, what kind of characteristics are relevant for this specific mitzvah, the specific prohibition, where we say you would get malkot. Here, the lav is not... the lav is the same. The lav fits into all the category, all the criteria that we've said. Just because, in addition to the lav, there's a mitzvah aseh that's written there. Is that a reason to change it? Is that a reason to change what we've said? No. So that's his answer. He says just because, right? Yeah, you have an aseh shekdamo that should not change anything. That's not a reason to say no malkot. So, well, wait a minute. Then says Rav Papa, okay. So says Rav Papa, if you're saying that the lav itself, right? For example, we understand lav she'ein bo ma'aseh. That's a characteristic in the mitzvah itself, in the prohibition, that is not similar to the lav of chasima, and therefore there's no malkot. Okay. But you're saying now that if there's something else, there's an additional mitzvah that's written in connection with that lav, it doesn't change the lav. It doesn't make it not similar to chasima, and it doesn't mean you don't get malkot. Well, if you extend that logic, say the same thing for a lav shenitak le'aseh, because again, the lav itself is the same. After you've done the lav, there's another mitzvah. There's a mitzvah taseh that's written. But why should that change anything? Right? Ihachi lav shenitak le'aseh nami. So, right, you should say the same thing, whereby there is a lav shenitak le'aseh. Leima mishum dekatav be'rachmana aseh yetera migra gara. Right? Are you going to say again, since the Torah wrote an additional mitzvah aseh and it wrote it next to that lav, that therefore it's going to take away, and you're not going to have Makkot, right? So how do we answer that? No, it says Amalei hahu lenetuke lavu deata. So over there we say no. There it's different because we have a lav shenitak le'aseh. You can't just say it's written there. And it just happens to be written afterwards. No, it's written there to connect it. It's written in order to teach you that you would not that you would not have the Makkot. It comes to precisely for that reason, right? It's coming to disconnect from the lav. Explains Rashi. It says asay. If you have an asay which can only be fulfilled after this averah has been committed, right? Asay she'eno mitkayem ela la'achar averat alav lenatek et alav me'onesh malkot u'ba. That's precisely what it's doing. It's coming to disconnect it. It's coming to remove it from the onesh of malkot, and that comes in place of the Makkot. So it's not something that's written additionally. And this is precisely the whole discussion we're having. So it's precisely the argument between Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish that we're going to see now. But exactly, do we say that a lav shekdamo aseh is that different from the lav shenitak le'aseh? That lav shenitak le'aseh, meaning that aseh comes specifically to disconnect, to remove this element of punishment, to come in place of the punishment. Whereas if it's a lav shekdamo aseh, it's something else. Okay, so that is so there's Adkan. Again, we remain. What we've said is that a lav shekdamo aseh, said Rabbi Yochanan, that one would get malkut for it. Why is the case of ones not a lav shekdamo aseh? Because the case of ones is actually a lav shenitak le'aseh, where there would be no malkut. And because of this ideas that Rava said of amod v'hachzer, kol yamav v'amod v'hachzer, that the aseh is incumbent upon him for the rest of his life until whenever he's divorced a woman, there is now a constant obligation on him for them to go and be remarried. So now the Gemara is going to challenge us in the following way, okay? And we're going to see that there are certain scenarios whereby a lav shenitak le'aseh, one could get malkut for. In fact, we've already seen it. Because take this case of ones. If we accept that the case of ones where one divorced and did not get remarried, or to get remarried, that is a lav shenitak le'aseh. So we saw a distinction already between a kohen and Israel, right? If one is a kohen, so then they would get malkut. Wait a minute. It's a lav shenitak le'aseh. How can you say there's malkut? So answer, in the case of the Kohen, it's impossible for him to fulfill the aseh, because once he's divorced, he has really removed, it's now a lot aseh, because he cannot remarry a divorcee, because he's a Kohen. And therefore, since there is no possibility, not even a theoretical possibility of him fulfilling that aseh, so it goes back to getting malkut. So you see that there is a scenario whereby somebody removed from themselves the ability to fulfill that aseh, then they would get malkut instead. So the question now is this, and this is going to be the machloket between Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish. When do we say that when you have a lav shenitak le'aseh, that the malkut would come in place of fulfilling the aseh? Is it where a person has removed the ability, they've cancelled what the Gemara is going to call bitlo, where they have completely removed the possibility of fulfilling that aseh, and therefore it's as if there is no more aseh, and therefore it's only malkut? Or do we say what the Gemara calls kimo, whereby not that they could still have in theory fulfilled it, but when a person violates and says, no, I'm not doing that, I'm not performing that aseh, therefore they will get malkut instead. That's the machloket between Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish. Is it where only where a person just does not fulfill it, or whereby a person removes the possibility of fulfilling the asay. So says the Gemara over here, we're on the second last line of the Amud. That which we've said so far in the explanation that Rava gave of Kol Yamav B'Amod Ve'achzer. It says the Gemara, Hanich Aleman Damar Bitlo V'Lo Bitlo. Says that makes sense according to the one who says, which we know is going to be Rabbi Yochanan. It says Bitlo V'Lo Bitlo. Okay, which means that Malkut would come only in a case whereby you have removed the possibility of fulfilling the asay. However, for the one who says that it's only when you have not fulfilled it, but you could still theoretically fulfill the mitzvah asay, what would we say? Okay, so let's see Rashi over here. A little bit complicated. We've got a long Rashi at the bottom of the Amud. He explains as follows. He says, "Hanicha leman datani bitlo velo bitlo, el leman datani kimo velo kimo ma'ika lemen." Like this. Ha de amat. Kol yamav amod v'achzer kai. So, according to what we've just said, again, we're working on Rava's explanation to say that by the case of ones, that it's kol yamav b'amod v'achzer, and therefore it's a lav shenitak le'aseh. So asito lav shenitak le'aseh, you've turned it into a lav shenitak le'aseh now. V'hirchavta lo zman lekiyum aseh, we've expanded the time in which one can fulfill the aseh, right? Having divorced, they can get remarried when his entire life, kol yamav. So therefore, he says v'lidvarecha. According to that the Baraita that we started off, the Baraita that we read right at the top of the Amud, we saw at the beginning of the Shiur, which said, right, that in this case, if he's a Yisrael, right, machziv eino lokeh, that he remarries and therefore does not get Malkot. Again, the implication is that if he did not remarry, then there would be Makkot. So leolam kama, kozman says Rashi, leolam kama, kozman sheachol lamar ani machzir ein beitin malkinoto. Right. So long as he can say, I'm going to get remarried. So long as he has the possibility, he can therefore go and he can remarry, and then Beitin would not give him Malkot.
Rabbi Kenigsberg,
Yes.
isn't another possibility where either the wife dies, in which case he can't remarry her, or if she herself gets remarried, unless she's some sort of aguna. If she were to get remarried, then he couldn't marry her.
Right. So once the wife dies, and there's no longer a possibility for him to remarry her. That's correct.
Then he would get Makkot.
If she was to die, and therefore he's not seemingly yes, therefore he's not fulfilled. He's not fulfilled. It may be dependent on this machloket. May be dependent on this. Let's carry on through. Let's just understand the case first. So he says the Gemara, says Rashi like this. We're now into the third line of the Rashi. That which we said, that if he can remarry and he would not get Malkot, so that is forever essentially, meaning as long as he can say, look, I don't need to get Malkot, I can still go. I haven't yet fulfilled the asay, but I can, and therefore there would be no Malkot. So hanicha laman datani lekaman belav hanitak leasay. That makes sense according to the opinion that we're about to say regarding lav hanitak leasay, that bitel et asay chayav alalav, lo bitel et asay patur. Right? If we say that it's dependent on bitel or lo bitel, i.e. that if he has that the Malkut would only kick in again, we're allowed. We're talking about a lav shenitak leasay, and we say our default position is there would not be Malkot because the asay comes in place of the Malkot. We're now asking, at what point do we say you have removed the asay and therefore the Malkot would kick in again? So if we say the only time you say you've removed the asay and the Makkot would kick in is when you say bitlo or lo bitlo, meaning you've removed the possibility, not that you haven't fulfilled it in practice, but that you've removed the possibility of being able to fulfill it. So the fact that he hasn't married her now, okay, he still can, he can still marry her. So I understand the Breita that says, right, machzir ve'no lokeh, because whenever he wants, he can go back and he can get married. That's what Rashi's explaining. Again, ve'no lokeh le'olam ke'amar kol zman she'achol lomar ani machzir ein beit din malkinoto. Right, so long as he can say, I'm remarrying and Beit Din won't give Malkot. This makes sense for the one who's going to say, but if he cancelled, if he nullified the asay, then he'd be chayav, right? Only then he'd get Malkot. Lo bitel et asay patur, but if he did not, he'd be exempt. Shehalav talui bebitul haasay ve'enon nigmar. Right. In other words, that the love, right, is going to be dependent in order to say that he has fulfilled the love to an extent that he's going to require malkot. That is only in a case where he's nullified the asay, and it's going to be impossible for him to fulfill it forever. That it cannot be that he's done something to remove it, that it can't be fulfilled. So therefore, Kol yamav yesh lo takana. You can therefore say, for as long as he wants, he has the possibility of chazara, of going back and remarrying. She'en mevatel ta'aseh ela im ken medila shelo ta'ana mimeno neder she'eno afara. So there Rashi just adds in a detail. He says that the always has this possibility of going back and marrying her. What would be the case of actually bitel? What would be the case, according to this opinion, where he nullified, where he completely cancelled the possibility of fulfilling the asay? That is, if he was to take a neder, a type of neder which could not be annulled, could not be undone, to say that he's mudar hana'ah from this woman, that he's not going to get any benefit from her, and therefore he would not be allowed to, marry her. That would be the case by Rabbi Yochanan of what we say of bitel ha'asay. Right, but the fact that he hasn't yet fulfilled what Beit Din told him, go back and get remarried. The fact that he hasn't yet done that is not called bitel. He still can, and therefore the Beit Din would not have the option to go in and give him up. Okay, that is all according to the opinion that we say it depends on bitlo or bitlo. However, continues Rashi, right? Fifth line from the end. Fourth line from the end. Sorry, 2 words from the end of the line. He says, "Ela leman datani kiyem et haaseh patur lo kimo chayav she'aseh tikuno shalavu." In other words, this is the other side. Meaning, the first side is to say that the asay goes together with the love. It's part of the it's all part of the same thing. It's all part of the love itself, and therefore the malkut would only apply if one had completely fulfilled the love, which means you've performed the love, you transgressed the love, and you've taken away any possibility of fulfilling the asay. It comes together as one action. That is the side to say bitlo or lo bitlo. That is Rabbi Yochanan's opinion. Reish Lakish's opinion, however, is different. Is to say it depends on whether you have meaning. What Reish Lakish is saying is the love stands by itself. Once you have performed it, once you have transgressed the love, you have transgressed, and that's it. The fact that there's an asay as well, the asay is there to give you a sort of a tikkun, right? He says, "Ela leman tani kiyem et asay patur lo kimo chayav," meaning once you have fulfilled the asay, you would then be patur. But if you have not fulfilled the asay, you've not done it, you could already there be chayav. Shasay tikuno shalav, because you've already transgressed the love, and the asay is just there in order to give you a tikkun. Ve'ein halav taloi bebitul asay. The love, the transgression itself, is not dependent on nullifying the asay that comes in its way. Shemisha'a shaval alav nigmar. From the time that, according to Reish Lakish, from the time that you have transgressed the negative prohibition, that's it. It's over, and you've done it completely. Aval asay nitan la'akor malkot. The asay there is given not as part of the transgression. The asay is given just in order to uproot the malkot. So he therefore says l'chsheyavo lebeitin or yekayem asay. So l'chsheyavo lebeitin. So what happens when he comes to beitin? Or yekayem asay v'yipater. Either he will fulfill the asay, and therefore he's going to be pater. He won't get malkot because he's performed the asay. Or he'll get malkot there and then. He comes to Beit Din. Beit Din says to him, "Okay, you have to remarry this woman." He says, "No, I'm not doing it," even though there's still a theoretical possibility. It doesn't matter. The minute that he said no, that he's not going to, that is kimo velo kimo, and then he hasn't done it. Therefore, he would now get malkot. Okay, so according to that, right? Here's the question. According to Rabbi Yochanan, we understand because it says he can go back and he can remarry any time he wants. According to Reish Lakish, it says that the moment he's come to Beit Din and he has not fulfilled the mitzvah, he is not remarried, then he gets malkut. He gets malkut there and then. So how can you say that this applies his entire life? How can you say it's kol yamav amod v'achzer? According to Reish Lakish, the kol yamav amod v'achzer. No, the possibility of fulfilling the asay as a very set time. It's when he comes to Beit Din and there and then. If he decides not to, then it's over and he gets his malkut. So says Rashi. So leika lamema kol yamav amod v'achzer kai. You can't say that. Kedekamot shim lo yachzirena miyad. Because if he does not get remarried immediately, once he comes to Beit Din, he's going to get malkot. You can't say he will fulfill it after time. Because then he hasn't fulfilled it. What would be the case? In other words, so what we say is like this. We have a machloket between Reish Lakish and Rabbi Yochanan, which the Gemara is now going to go into more detail. But the machloket of Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish is, when do we say we have the lav shenitak le'aseh, right? What is essentially here? What is the time frame? But when do we say that the asay is finished? One has removed themselves from the possibility of fulfilling the asay, and they are now actually going to get malkot instead. So according to Rabbi Yochanan, so long as you have the possibility of fulfilling the asay, we keep that open. There won't be malkot, right? So long as you have a theoretical possibility. It's only if you cancelled it, only if bitlo, if you nullified, you took away the possibility, you took a neder that he can't marry this woman, so now it's impossible for him to fulfill the asay, only then he would get malkot. But otherwise, there's no malkot, we wait. According to Reish Lakish, no. According to Reish Lakish, it's kimo lo kimo. Did he fulfill it or not? If he didn't fulfill it, then we say he hasn't done the asay, that's over, and he's going to get the malkut instead. And we said, based on the reason we said that the case of ones was a lav shenitak le'aseh is because the pasuk says kol yamav, and it says kol yamav be'amod v'achzer. His entire life now, he has the possibility. It's required. It's incumbent upon him to go and remarry to fulfill that asay. So that makes sense according to Rabbi Yochanan. But according to the other opinion, where we say it's kimo velo kimo, the minute that he has not, he's come to Beit Din and he has not remarried, well, he no longer has the ability to go back and remarry whenever he wants because he's already gotten malkut for it. So what do we say? So that was the question of the Gemara. Again, it says anicha lemandama bitlo velo bitlo. It makes sense according to the one who says bitlo lo bitlo, whether you've cancelled the option, the possibility of fulfilling the asay. However, but the one that says no, it's whether you have fulfilled it or not, right? So what can we say? So now we turn over onto the top of Amud Bet. Says the Gemara, really it's not going to be a question. Why? Because midi utama ela Rabbi Yochanan. Right? Why did we come along in the first place and say? Why did we come along in the first place and say that we have to understand ones as a lav shenitak le'aseh? And why do we need this drashav telling us that it's kol yamav be'amod v'achzer? All of that was to explain the shita of Rabbi Yochanan, because Rabbi Yochanan said that a lav shekdamo aseh you would get malkut for. So how can it be? We had a kasha on Rabbi Yochanan Shita. How could you say that you get malkut for a lav shekdamo aseh from the case of ones? So we explained the case of ones a certain way according to Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yochanan is also the one who says bitlo velo bitlo, right? So now to come and say this explanation only makes sense according to Rabbi Yochanan in the Machlokes Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish. That's fine. This is only an explanation according to Rabbi Yochanan's Shita. According to Reish Lakish Shita, it doesn't work. But that's fine because Reish Lakish says in the first place that I love Shekdamo say you wouldn't get malkut for anyway. So therefore we're not concerned about that. And that's what the Gemara says. Midi hu tama ela Rabbi Yochanan. Right? So it says Rashi. Midi hu tama ela Rabbi Yochanan. Miutzrach lidrosh kol yamav v'mod v'achzer. Who was the one? According to who are we required to have this limud of kol yamav? Right, that is Rabbi Yochanan. Shamar lo taseh shekdamo aseh lokin alav. He was the one who said this. The kasha le ones. Right, we have the kasha from the case of ones. Shegilish diktani. This says eino lokeh. Right, because we saw that they don't get malkut. V'tzrach lasoto lav shenitak laseh. We had to have this limud to explain that it is a lav shenitak laseh. So now the Gemara is just going to show that Rabbi Yochanan is the one who said bitlo velo bitlo. Right? Says the Gemara, v'amar le Rabbi Yochanan letana tani bitlo chayav lo bitlo patur. Now Rabbi Yochanan is the one who says that we have a memra over here. This is where the machloket starts off from, and the question was whether it should say bitlo or whether it should say kimo. So Rabbi Yochanan is the one who says bitlo. Let's just quickly see it inside, and then we'll explain further in the next year. So he says, the Tani, third line now in the Gemara, Tetvav Bet. The Tani Tanak Kamed Rabbi Yochanan was taught in front of Rabbi Yochanan. Kol mitzvot lo taseh sheyesh ba kum aseh. Any negative mitzvah which has a kum aseh, in other words, any lav shenitak leaseh. So initially he says a statement in the Gemara, kiyem aseh sheba patur, bitel aseh sheba chayav. If one fulfilled the aseh, right, then one would be patur, one would be exempt. One would be exempt from malkot. However, bitel aseh sheba, but if you nullified, if you cancelled the ability to fulfill the aseh, then you'd be chayav malkot. So you see the stira over here. It says on the one hand, it says kiyem, then you'd be patur, meaning if you fulfilled it. But then it says bitel would be chayav. So which one is it? Is it whether you fulfilled it or didn't fulfill it, or is it whether you nullified the possibility or not? So says Rabbi Yochanan, my kayamat. What are you saying? Either it has to be kiyem patur lo kiyem chayav, or bitel chayav lo bitel patur. It has to be consistent, but it can't be kiyem in one direction and chayav in the other direction, and bitel in the other way. So he says tani bitlo velo bitlo. Therefore, Rabbi Yochanan says it has to be bitlo and lo bitlo. That's what we're talking about. Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish, Reish Lakish says no. He says kimo velo kimo. It depends on whether you actually fulfilled it or not. And now says the Gemara, what's behind this machloket? What conceptually? Why did Rabbi Yochanan say it depends on bitlo and no bitlo, and Reish Lakish said it depends on kimo lo kimo? But Maika Miflege, their machloket is about hatra'at safek. Somebody gave hatra'ah, and it was a safek, it was a doubt as to whether that hatra'ah would actually work afterwards or not. Mas hatra'at safek shmatra, mas hatra'at safek lo shmatra. Says the Gemara that Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish, they argued on this point, and that's going to relate to what the machloket is here between bitlo or kimo. But we'll go into that more next time. Adkan for today. So yasher koach everybody. Again, just a reminder, so there will be no shiur tomorrow, unfortunately, but we will carry on Wednesday.
Thank you.
Yeah.